It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. Can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and asked for that not to happen.
Stay with me, because the full video I'm about to show you puts everything into a new perspective. Right, so picture this. It's a perfectly ordinary Wednesday in the House of Commons. MPs are shuffling in, someone's probably asleep in a back row, and then Nigel Farage stands up. And within approximately 45 seconds, the entire chamber sounds like a football stadium after a controversial offside decision. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to British democracy in action. Grab your tea, because this one is something else entirely. Now, for those of you who haven't been following along, we need to set the scene properly. The tragic death of Henry Nowak had been sending shockwaves across the country, with communities grieving, tensions running high, and the public desperately looking to their elected representatives for some form of leadership, calm and measured response, which is, of course, exactly what they did not get. Instead, what they got was this, a full-throttled, no-holds-barred, shouty Commons exchange that left absolutely everyone wondering whether these people are actually running a country or auditioning for a particularly dramatic episode of EastEnders. Real quick before we roll the footage, if you're enjoying this content, do me a huge favour. Hit that like button and smash subscribe. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. Don't be one of them. It's free for you and it helps us out more than you know. Already clicked? You're awesome. Let's get into the video.
Nigel Farage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the horrendous circumstances of Henry Nowak's death, can I urge the Prime Minister to consider this? It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. The instructions that are given to police officers from police bosses are clear and written down in ink. It says you must treat different ethnic groups in different ways. That, apart from the upset and the anger at the circumstances of his death, the anger that you saw spilling out in Southampton last night, and which is in danger,
condemn the violence,
which is in danger of getting considerably worse, because if the public lose trust,
condemn it.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. I'm really shocked that he pretends to have respect for Henry's family and then acts in this way. They are a grieving family.
Mr. Brash, please, it's a very important question. I want to hear the Prime Minister. If you want to carry on, go outside, please, Prime Minister.
Grieving family have asked us not to respond in the way that the Leader of Reform has responded. They've asked us not to. They have lost their son in the most appalling circumstance. They make a simple plea of us as human beings to please not exploit that. That is their plea to us. And we all need to reflect on those words of Henry's father. My response, and the response of others, to be fair, has been focused on the lessons to be learned so we can deliver justice. His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and asked for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable. It shows exactly who he is.
Farage kicks things off by raising what he calls two-tier policing, the suggestion that British police forces operate differently depending on who's involved in a given situation, and that this disparity is written into official guidance for officers. Now, whatever your politics, whatever your view on Nigel Farage, and let's be honest, people's views on Nigel Farage tend to be rather strong in one direction or the other, this was always going to land like a grenade in a library. Because the moment he stood up and started speaking, the Labour benches absolutely erupted. We're talking groans, we're talking shouts, we're talking the kind of collective noise that suggests several dozen people have just been told the bar is closed, permanently. And Farage, being Farage, keeps going. He references the scenes in Southampton the previous evening, where anger over Henry Nowak's death had spilled into the streets, with reports of disorder and violence. He's building his argument. Public trust in policing is fragile. The instructions given to officers are, in his words, clear and written down in ink. And if something isn't done to make every British citizen feel equally protected under the law, things are going to get considerably worse. Now, the Labour benches, apparently not in the mood to sit quietly and absorb any of this, are shouting, "Condemn the violence," while he's still talking, which creates this absolutely wonderful situation where Farage is trying to make a serious point about civil unrest, and the backdrop is a room full of politicians essentially heckling him mid-sentence. It's less Prime Minister's questions and more a very aggressive pub debate, just with slightly better suits. Then the Speaker steps in, because of course he does, and tries to restore some semblance of order. And then the Prime Minister responds. And this is where things take a rather sharp turn into deeply personal territory. Keir Starmer does not engage with the two-tier policing argument directly, at least not in any detailed policy sense. Instead, he goes straight for something that will be far more politically combustible: the family. Henry Nowak's grieving family, he tells the Chamber, have made a specific plea. They have asked publicly that their son's death not be exploited for political purposes. They have lost their child in appalling circumstances, and their request, the request of a father who has just buried his son, is simply, please do not use this, do not weaponize our grief, do not turn our tragedy into a campaign. And Starmer looks directly at Farage and says, in effect, that is exactly what you have just done. He accuses Farage of appealing for rage. Rage, he says, that's his response to a father who's lost his son and asked for that not to happen. He calls the exploitation of the tragedy unforgivable, particularly so given the family's explicit wishes, and ends with the kind of line that's clearly designed to cut deep. It shows exactly who he is. Now, the Chamber at this point is in absolute uproar. The Labour side is cheering, the Reform side is furious, the Speaker is presumably quietly reconsidering all of his life choices, and the rest of us, watching at home or in the public gallery, are left trying to unpick what on earth just happened. Here's the thing that makes this exchange so genuinely fascinating and so difficult to simply dismiss. Both men are, in their own way, making arguments that have real emotional weight behind them. Farage's point about public trust in policing is not made up. Concern about unequal treatment under the law is a real and growing issue that cuts across communities and political allegiances. When large numbers of people feel that the rules are applied differently depending on who you are, that is a serious problem for any democratic society, and it deserves to be discussed seriously. But Starmer's point is also not nothing. When a family, a real, grieving family who have just lost their son, asks the political class not to use their pain as ammunition, there is something genuinely uncomfortable about watching that request be declined in real time on the floor of the House of Commons. The question of whether raising Henry Nowak's name in this context constitutes legitimate political scrutiny or something more opportunistic is not a simple one, and reasonable people can land in very different places on it. What is not in question is that both men walked out of that chamber believing they had won the argument. And that is perhaps the most revealing thing of all about modern politics. Not that politicians disagree, because that's the whole point, but that they can watch the same exchange and reach completely opposite conclusions about who came out of it looking worse. The Labour benches were convinced Starmer had put Farage in his place. The Reform benches were equally convinced that Farage had exposed something the government doesn't want to talk about. The British public, meanwhile, is sitting at home eating biscuits and wondering, entirely reasonably, whether any of them are actually going to do anything about any of it. What we do know is this: the House of Commons, whatever its many flaws, never fails to provide drama. It never fails to remind you that underneath all the procedural language and the hears and the Mr. Speakering, there are real people with real passions and real political calculations running simultaneously. Whether that's reassuring or terrifying probably depends on how you feel about democracy in general, and on how strong your tea is. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Genuinely. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me whose performance in that chamber you thought was more convincing. I'll be reading every single one of them. See you in the next one.